Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going way back
Hmm.
to Brazil
Yeah.
in the 60s and 70s.
Oh, yeah.
It was a really intense time with the military dictatorship and everything. And
Right.
we're going to look into the story of Rubens Paiva, a politician who stood up to the regime.
Yeah, he's a fascinating figure. To really understand him, we've got some really interesting sources for this deep dive.
Oh, cool.
So we have excerpts from Ainda Estou Aqui, which translates to I'm Still Here,
Okay.
written by Rubens Paiva's son Marcelo years after
Wow.
everything happened.
So there's like a first-hand account.
Yeah, exactly. It's very personal and moving. And then we also have this declassified document from the Brazilian Ministry of Public Prosecution.
Oh, wow.
That's really going to help us unpack the details of his disappearance and the government's attempts to cover it up.
That's incredible. So we're going to see both sides of the story, the personal and the political.
Exactly. It's going to be a wild ride, so buckle up.
So Rubens Paiva, where did it all begin for him?
Well, his family were Italian immigrants who came to Brazil in the early 1900s.
Gotcha.
They settled in São Paulo, which was changing so much at the time.
Okay.
They first lived in Braz, a working-class Italian neighborhood, super vibrant.
I see.
But then they moved to Higienópolis, a much wealthier area.
So like a total shift in,
Totally. It makes you think about how that might have shaped Rubens, seeing such different sides of society.
right. And in Marcelo's book, he talks about how his father loved music and dancing, especially the foxtrot.
Oh, the foxtrot, huh?
Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, think about it. The foxtrot wasn't even Brazilian.
Oh, right.
It was this American dance that took the world by storm back then.
Right.
You know, for Brazilians, it was glamorous, modern, even a little rebellious.
Makes sense.
Like they were figuring out their own identity.
So for the Paiva family, being immigrants themselves, it was maybe a way to hold on to their Italian heritage while embracing something new and exciting.
That's a great point. Such a small detail, but it speaks volumes.
It does, yeah.
And Rubens wasn't just a dancer, he was also an engineer.
Wow, quite the
I know, right?
combination.
Yeah, but it was his strong sense of justice that drew him to politics. He eventually became a federal deputy.
Now, for listeners who maybe aren't familiar with Brazilian politics, what exactly did that role involve?
Well, think of it as kind of like a congressman here in the U.S.
Okay,
Basically, he was elected to represent the people, and Rubens took that really seriously.
that's great.
And this is where his story gets really interesting, because this is when things start to go downhill in Brazil in the early 60s, with political instability and tensions were rising, and finally it all culminated in that military coup in 1964.
Right, a really dark period in Brazil's history. And Rubens Paiva, who was very outspoken against the military, he was forced into exile.
It's hard to imagine being torn from your home, your entire life turned upside down.
Right.
A lot of people went through this, including Rubens and his family, and they lived with so much uncertainty, not knowing if they'd ever see their loved ones again.
Yeah, that must have been awful.
Absolutely. And Marcelo, his son, actually writes about this crazy moment where Rubens had to escape during the coup.
Oh,
He wasn't exactly in shape, but he managed to climb this wall and evade the military.
that's pretty incredible.
Talk about resourceful and determined.
Yeah.
But it also shows you the kind of fear and chaos that was everywhere at the time. People were literally running for their lives.
Scary to even think about.
And even when he was in exile, Rubens couldn't stay silent. He kept supporting those being persecuted back in Brazil.
Oh, wow. So he never stopped fighting for what he believed in.
Exactly. He was a thorn in the side of the regime, even from afar.
Wow. So then he decides to return to Brazil.
He did, yeah.
Why? Why would he risk going back?
It's tough to say for sure. He had his young family in Rio, and he was working as an engineer, trying to rebuild a life.
Okay.
But there were also these coded messages going back and forth, hinting at the growing danger.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, and sadly, those warnings became a reality in January 1971.
Oh, no.
Rubens was arrested right at his home, and Marcelo, his son, actually saw it all happen.
Oh, my gosh. That's awful. To witness your father being taken away by armed soldiers?
Imagine the fear and confusion, especially as a young boy.
That's just heartbreaking.
It all happened because of that coded message, which really highlights how widespread the surveillance was back then.
Anyone could be targeted just for talking to the wrong person.
It was a terrifying time. So Rubens arrested, they take him to this military barracks along with his wife and daughter.
Oh, no. I can't even imagine.
And Marcelo, at such a young age, he's suddenly confronted with the brutal reality of the dictatorship.
So that's where the story takes a really dark turn.
Yeah, things are about to get really intense.
It's hard to imagine what Rubens and his family went through.
It's a stark reminder of how cruel these regimes can be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Inside that military barracks, it must have been terrifying.
Absolutely. They were separated, interrogated, subjected to psychological torture.
Oh my gosh.
Marcelo doesn't hold back in his book. He describes the fear, the helplessness. They felt completely powerless.
It's just awful.
And then there's this one detail. It's small, but it really shows how twisted the regime was.
What's that?
They would blast popular music,
Yeah.
like Roberto Carlos, Chico Buarque, big names.
Wow.
To drown out the screams of the people being tortured.
That's so disturbing.
These beautiful songs used as a tool of terror.
It really makes you think about how they tried to hide what they were doing, maintain this facade of normalcy.
Yeah, while committing horrific acts.
And for years, the government denied any involvement in Rubens Paiva's disappearance.
Right. They gave all these conflicting stories, leaving the family in agony, not knowing what happened.
That's been unbearable.
But they never gave up. They kept searching for the truth, driven by love and a need for answers.
Amazing.
And eventually, a little bit of light came through. A fellow detainee, Cecilia Viveros de Castro, wrote a letter.
A letter.
Yeah, she had been on the same flight as Rubens when he was first captured.
Oh, wow.
And her letter confirmed that he was in prison, that he was being tortured.
So it was a breakthrough, but also a confirmation of their worst fears.
Yeah, exactly. A bittersweet moment, for sure.
And ultimately, the truth did come out.
Years later.
Yeah, confirming Rubens Paiva's death and the details. It was horrifying.
It confirmed the torture, the cover-up. It exposed the regime's brutality.
It's just chilling.
The Paiva family never gave up. Even when it seemed impossible, they kept pushing for justice.
They're incredible. I mean, Eunice Paiva, Rubens' wife, she's a real symbol of strength.
Absolutely. She raised her children, kept her husband's memory alive. She's an inspiration.
And Marcelo, he channeled his pain into his writing, his activism.
He gave a voice to so many who suffered during the dictatorship, demanding accountability.
That's powerful.
Their fight led to the Brazilian government finally acknowledging the crime.
It's a step towards justice.
And the memorials dedicated to Rubens Paiva all over Brazil, it shows you the impact he had.
His legacy lives on.
But the story doesn't end there.
Right. There's another tragic turn involving Eunice.
She was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease.
Oh, no. After all those years fighting for justice, holding on to those memories.
Imagine that, the woman who dedicated her life to remembering her husband, now struggling to remember his face.
The irony is heartbreaking.
Marcelo writes about these later years so honestly and tenderly. He talks about the challenges, the small moments of joy when she had moments of clarity.
It must have been so difficult for him dealing with that while still processing his father's death.
He talks about these small acts of love from Eunice, even when she couldn't remember why she was doing them.
Like what?
There's this one part where she's trying to stretch her son's paralyzed hand.
Wow.
She doesn't remember why, but that motherly instinct is still there.
That's really beautiful.
And there's another detail that really stuck with me. Eunice, she never actually said the word Alzheimer's.
Really?
It's like she was resisting, another form of erasure, even in her final years.
Holding on to her identity, the memories that shaped her.
It's incredibly powerful. It shows you the resilience of the human spirit.
It does. Even in the face of such loss, there's still love, there's still hope.
And it reminds us to cherish our loved ones, fight for what we believe in as long as we can.
This deep dive has been a journey.
It has.
The Paiva family story, it's a mix of tragedy, resilience, love, and a fight for truth that continues today.
It makes you think about the power of memory, about our responsibility to stand up against oppression.
Now, before we wrap up, let's look at that declassified document.
Okay, let's dive into that.
So this document, it really gives you the cold, hard facts,
It does, yeah. It's almost like a blueprint of how they went after Rubens Paiva, tracking his every move, intercepting communications.
Wow.
They were building this case against him.
It's like something out of a spy movie.
I know, right? But with real-life consequences.
And that coded message that led to his arrest, it's all there in the document, right?
It is, laid out in black and white.
Wow.
And it shows you how much they wanted to make an example of him, send a message.
Yeah. Silence any opposition.
Fear was their weapon.
It's disturbing how effective that can be.
And the document, it goes into the details of what happened after his arrest, confirming the torture.
Right. The things that Marcelo talks about in his book.
The interrogation methods, the physical and psychological abuse, it's all there.
Hard to read, but important to acknowledge what happened.
We can't shy away from the truth. These were real people, real lives, shattered.
And for years, those responsible got away with it.
hiding behind their power, their secrets.
But this document, it brings it all to light.
The evidence is right there, the names of those involved.
A step towards accountability.
Yeah, even though it's so long overdue.
It shows that the fight for justice, it can't ever really end.
There are still so many unanswered questions about the dictatorship in Brazil.
Right. We have to keep searching, keep pushing.
Just like Eunice and Marcelo, they never gave up.
Their story, it's incredible. Really powerful.
Rubens Paiva's life, it's a reminder of how fragile democracy is.
And how dangerous unchecked power can be.
We have to protect our freedoms, never take them for granted.
Absolutely.
But there's also hope in this story, right?
Yeah.
The Paiva family, their resilience, their love, it's inspiring.
It really is.
It shows that even in the darkest times, the human spirit can endure.
And that truth has a way of coming out eventually.
It might take time, but it will come.
This deep dive, it's been a roller coaster of emotions.
From the depths of cruelty to the strength of the human spirit.
Rubens Paiva's story, it's a reminder that we all have a role to play in fighting for a more just world.
And making sure that atrocities like this never happen again.
So thank you for joining us on this journey. It's been a privilege to share this story with you.
And we hope it's given you something to think about, to discuss, to carry with you.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive. Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, keep the conversation going.